United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. We've got a pretty full house tonight. This is great. I am Julie Pierce. I'm the chair. I would like to open the meeting with our first item, which is public comment. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to comment on any item not listed on tonight's agenda? I do have 2 speaker cards for agenda item 3.1, but I don't have any cards for public comment. Seeing no one rush the podium, I will close the public comment period. And for the record, a couple meetings ago, we failed to ratify the committee appointments, which are the admin committee, which is Julie Pierce, Newell Arnrich, Tom Butt, Bob Taylor, and Don Tatson. And the planning committee is Dave Hudson, Janet Abelson, David Durant, Karen Mitchoff, and Kevin Romick. Can I get a motion for ratification, please?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Mitchoff, a second from Abelson. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. I would like to welcome Chris Peoples to our meeting tonight, your first meeting with our august body, and we welcome your input into our discussions. Chris represents AC Transit and the western side of the county, and we welcome you representing the small transit operators. Thank you. And we're pretty much a full house. We've got Bart here, and yes.
Thank you, Chair Pierce. I'm thinking that I'd like to call the roll, although it, just for the record,
Okay.
since we do
That would
audio
be fine.
broadcast our meetings now.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hudson?
Here.
Commissioner Tatson?
Here.
Commissioner Mitchoff? Alternate Anderson for
Here.
Commissioner Glover?
Here.
Commissioner Butt?
Here.
Commissioner Abelson?
Here.
Commissioner Romick?
Here.
Commissioner Durant?
Here.
Commissioner Arnerich?
Here.
Commissioner Taylor? We also, let's see, Chair Pierce?
Here.
We also have ex officio representatives, Chris Peoples, Gail Murray, and Amy Worth. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. We appreciate that. Next item on the agenda is the minutes of our February 18th meeting. Any additions, corrections, or a motion?
So moved. Second.
A motion from Arnerich and a second over here from Tatson. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
And one abstention.
And one abstention, I'm sorry. All righty. Okay. So we are on to the consent calendar. Is there any item anyone wishes to pull for separate discussion, or do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Tatson, second by Romick. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving right along, we are down to item 3.1, our major discussion item. And we will have a brief staff report, and then we will go to our speaker cards. Ross, this is your item.
Thank you, Chair Pierce, Commissioners. Ross Chittenden, Deputy Executive Director for Projects, here with the authority. Item 3.1 on the agenda is a discussion intended to obtain board approval to initiate the development of a transportation expenditure plan, or TEP. You'll hear me say that term often. This item, if approved, will allow staff to work with our consultant team to further develop a strategy and a plan of action to prepare the expenditure plan in time to be ready as early for a ballot in 2016. So this is intended for action at a ballot 2016, or it could carry over to subsequent ballots. That's a decision for a later day. So I'd like to give you a brief background on the issue and then seek your direction to begin this process. So under your guidance and with input from stakeholders throughout Contra Costa, we've developed the 2014 Countywide Transportation Plan, or the draft of the plan, also known as the CTP. The process, working through the process, we've identified goals, strategies, and action items needed to achieve certain service objectives. Your staff report includes the numbers. There's roughly $32 billion in identified needs, with about 20.5 of available resources. This is over the next 25-year period. A little bit of work to do, but at the end of the day, everyone agrees that we need additional resources to maintain the level of service we have, and then find ways to increase or improve some of those services. So we believe it's now time to start the process to prioritize our need and start looking at ways to obtain additional resources. The committed funding in the CTP is about $3.4 billion for projects, about $17 billion for maintenance, operations, and programs. So on the project side, that leaves about a $9 billion shortfall, and improving the maintenance, operations, and programs, there's about a $2 billion shortfall. The resources, the committed resources, includes all state, federal, regional dollars that are available to us, and includes the full extent of Measure J. So this is what we see right now as committed funding. So obviously the question is, what can we do to fund that gap? As kind of an aside, I spent the day in Sacramento today, meeting with a number of folks with the Self-Help County Coalition. We had a meeting with Jim Arp. We had another meeting with members from the Assembly, including Assembly Member Frazier. So there's some talk in Sacramento about some revenue, but certainly that's not a sure thing, and certainly it's not the size that would fill the kind of funding gap we're talking about. As you know, the feds need to, well, at this point in time, it looks like they're going to be working on another extension to MAP 21, and then maybe they can begin to work on a long-term reauthorization, a new transportation bill. Not a lot of likelihood that that's going to have increased funding. Right now, their goal is to make the trust fund solvent and maintain the level of funding we have. So put those together, Sacramento, Washington, maybe they can bring in a little bit of help. Regional sources are stable. This is what provides much of the funding that we've identified for the transit operations, a lot of the programs, the big $17 billion that we saw, and a certain level of funding for projects as well. But right now, that's stable. Again, we're not seeing a likelihood for a big increase there. So at the end of the day, exercising our authority as a self-help county is an option that staff believes we need to consider, and that's the item that's here today. As pointed out in the staff report, more and more we're reliant on these local generated funds to meet our needs, and as we pointed out, they have the ability to attract a lot of leveraged funds. It's over the course of Measure C and Measure J, we've been able to attract about a 70% for additional funding for every dollar that we've been able to invest from the local taxpayers here. So that's a nice return on that. One of the things I'd like to point out is you have a handout on the dais that includes a high-level schedule for development of TEP. I would like to point out that this isolates the TEP process, but you've seen at least 3 separate times in your packet a schedule that's pretty much identical to this one. It had a longer process that linked the CTP and the TEP. So even though it's isolated here, this is pretty much identical to the schedule that you've seen most recently in November. That schedule did show initiating this process about now, March or April. So from that perspective, we're on track with the thoughts that we've had all along and going through the CTP process. We wanted to set that up and provide us ample time to work with stakeholders. We need this amount of time if we're going to think about going to 2016. We need to engage the RTPCs, we need to engage the city, the counties, transit agencies, and then additional stakeholders throughout the county. Part of what we'll come back with would be outreach strategy, including the right times or suggested times for polling. So that's really what we need to do with your approval, or if we get your approval today, is to take this outline of a schedule, flesh it out a little bit, work on some policy considerations for oversight and some oversight committees, internal and external committees. So that's what we're seeking here. We'd also want to work to develop some general principles that would guide development of the TEP, something that brings everybody together, gets everybody at the table under a single tent where we can sort out our commonalities and likely differences on opinion on how we should invest the resources that we get. So I would like to be brief here. Staff's recommendation is to formally initiate the process, asking for your direction to work with the consultant team and staff to come back with more detail on the schedule, higher level of detail on work plan, an estimated budget, and some of the policy decisions that we would seek from you. So I'd like to conclude my presentation and be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions at this time? Questions, not discussion, but questions at this
That
time,
was my-
Karen?
So do we have public speakers? who
Yes,
wish-
I do have two public speakers. Okay. Do you have a question, Janet?
Yes, I had a question in what I saw. You were including a thing about matching sources of funds from other sources. Was that just referring to projects, or was that programs? Or what?
That's a good question, because we've been trying to find the best way to talk about this. The number I used is overall for every dollar we've collected, what we've been able to leverage. For projects themselves, it's 3 to 1. So this is overall for programs, projects, the entire extent of what we've been able to count as additional dollars that we've been able to attract into the county.
You mean currently? Or in the current numbers? For the
Historically.
historically,
yeah.
okay.
And the number I'm using includes both Measure C and J. And J, we've been a little more successful with Prop 1B and the Recovery Act and so forth. So that was a good timing move on that one.
So are you making a statement in the supporting documents here about the future, that it would be a certain number for programs? That's what I don't quite understand.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, we're not at this point in time ready to start talking with any specificity about the investments that we'd want to have, the split between projects and programs, or how much any particular project, or if a particular project would be in the expenditure plan. That's something we need to do over the next 8 months or so, working with RTPC and the other stakeholders that I've listed. Is, what is the suite of investments that best suit the needs of the county and would give the public the comfort so we could get over a 2/3 threshold that we'd need in
Thank you.
2016.
Okay. Questions? Okay. Don?
Thank you, Ross. I just wanted to make sure I understood that when you talked about we'd also look at policy provisions, are those things like the growth management plan that you mentioned on page 2 of the report?
Yes, there's a number, and they're not all in the staff report. Things would be, what do we want for a policy board? Do we want to have the whole board, subset? In the past, you had a subset of the board. Growth management plan, things like, do we amend Measure J? Is it a new ordinance? So the amount and the term. So there's a whole lot of decisions that we need to think about as we go through this. But growth management program is here. I'm sure that's staying. So what form does it stay?
Okay. Chris?
Yeah, can you educate us a little bit about the relationship among 3 things? The County Comprehensive Transportation Plan, the TEP, and the Sandag decision, which has largely been left untouched by the Supreme Court except for the 2050 issue, and how those 3 work together.
I might need some help on the last one. So the CTP is a process that's embodied in law and guidelines where we work with our stakeholders and constituents to identify the types of programs and projects to meet certain service objectives. So we've done that through elaborative process over the last couple of years, working with action plans out of each of the RTPCs, and the types of projects and programs that would meet those objectives. It is not intended or is not designed to prioritize which of those projects would best meet certain other performance outcomes. So that's what we're talking about now, is to take that big pile, or I shouldn't say pile, the list portfolio of needs we have, get input and prioritize those. We'll, as I mentioned, we'll talk about an amount of a sales tax increase and a term so that we can estimate that pretty reliably with input of some economists. We'll make some assumptions about the amount of external revenue that'll attract, and then that can set a target for what we should prioritize too. I don't know, Randy, if you can help on the 20 and the Sandag issue. I know you've been down there a few times.
Yeah, the Sandag lawsuits is being heard by, they're trying to put it before the Supreme Court for a ruling. So it's difficult to answer that question because the Supreme Court hasn't ruled.
Well, the Supreme Court only accepted one of the 5 issues that they tried to bring up. So the only issue that the court is taking up is whether the Schwarzenegger and Brown 2050 targets are cast in stone. All the other issues, the California Supreme Court declined to take up. So they're there. There's going to be a lot of debate about that in California for the next year or so.
A topic will be, there'll be input into this discussion.
Okay, very good. Let's go to our 2 public speakers. If there's anyone else that wants to fill out a speaker card, do it now, please. But our first speaker is Dave Campbell with Bike East Bay. And then after that will be Juan Pablo Galvin with Save Mount Diablo.
Dave Campbell, I'm the Advocacy Director with Bike East Bay, formerly East Bay Bicycle Coalition. We changed our name last year for those who don't know. And we do bike advocacy work in Contra Costa County, Alameda County. And here to speak in support of moving forward with the Transportation Expenditure Plan development and going to the voters if it makes sense to do so in 2016. But before I forget, I do want to remind everybody, May 14th is Bike to Work Day in the Bay Area, and 501 Contra Costa is a sponsor, and a lot of the cities here are sponsors, so thank you for your support. BART as well as a sponsor. So mark your calendars. Back to Measure J. We're ready to take the message to the voters. We're ready to get our volunteers involved on the phones, talking to voters, walking precincts, making this happen. We had a good experience in Alameda County in 2014 making that happen. We had a good experience in 2012 as well, but we came up short, as you probably know. And we made some mistakes in Alameda County in 2012, and they made some mistakes even in 2014 as well that we don't need to repeat here. And the most important lesson I can bring to you is we have to listen to the voters, and that the polling is that important. And I know we'll be doing some more polling. That's great. We need that. We need to continue to take the pulse of the voters. When we went through the voters in 2012, I think we didn't even do a good job listening on the campaign trail. And we were hearing some things, and we weren't adjusting our messages. We were fixed in what we were trying to do. So we need to be flexible in that respect as well. But the polling is key. And I know everybody has their favorite pet projects, and if it polls well, you got my support. And if my bike projects don't poll well, take me in the back room and woodshed me on that. But we have to stick to the polling because it's going to be hard. We know it's going to be very hard to get 2/3 support. So when your colleagues have their pet projects that don't poll well, that's going to drag down our voter support, which means the other projects in the plan are going to have to poll even better to carry the load. So we all need to stick together and honor what the voters are telling us they're willing to support. But we're definitely ready to invest in a better transportation system in Alameda County, Contra Costa County, the whole East Bay, and we know we need more money to do that, to make our cities walkable, bikeable. So thanks.
Very good.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Dave. We'll appreciate your support and involvement as we go forward. Juan Pablo Galvin for Save Mount Diablo, followed by Joel Develcourt, something like that.
Hi, my name is Juan Pablo Galvan. I'm with Save Mount Diablo. We represent about 8,000 donors and supporters. In 1971, when we got started, there was one park around Mount Diablo, about 5,000 acres. Today, there are more than 50, totaling more than 110,000, and we played a small role in that. But just wanted to say that we were leading a coalition that was heavily involved in the first Measure J, and if a TEP gets started today or very soon, we're looking forward to being involved in that one, going for transit, getting people alternatives to single-occupant auto transport, and looking for innovative ways to mitigate impacts not only on transportation, but on habitats, wildlife, the whole environment. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And Joel, followed by Bruce Olson.
Thank you, Julie. I appreciate you getting closer to my name than just about everybody.
Well, tell me what's correct.
It's Joel DeValcourt.
DeValcourt. Okay, yeah. I couldn't
I
quite
could do it
read
French,
your handwriting.
But then it'd be,
okay.
I don't want to boggle people.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm the regional representative for Greenbelt Alliance. And just to start off, it's great to see Measure J has been a notable tool in growth management in Contra Costa and throughout the region, and people speak very highly of Measure J and its ability to do the work that's important to balance land use and transportation. And in these two new times, as we all know, a lot's changed over the last decade, and so it's really critical to not just take it to the next level, but many levels beyond. So I'm just going to give a few things that we covered both in our in the letter that we had on the CTP, just to give a little flavor of what we expect from a TEP moving forward. One is, since the TEP apparently is moving now before the CTP and EIR have been finalized, we really encourage CCTA to do some kind of performance-based project assessment for prioritizing projects, since they're essentially moving forward in tandem now, and that perhaps could align better with the polls, so that we make sure that the projects moving forward are the ones that will be successful. It's also a little bit troubling to find that many of the programs are as much, if not more, than 18 months behind, and that 40% of the projects are 2 years behind schedule. And many of those programs are some of the highlights that people really get behind, things like the Transportation for Livable Communities program, which allows a lot of those land use transportation connections to happen. So we'd really like to see more proof that those things are going to be highlighted, those things are going to work to enhance our cities and protect our open space. So we'd also like to see an enhanced Transportation for Livable Communities program that would be working in coordination with the OBAG program, and that really will make it much more robust. Also hoping that any kind of expenditure plan advisory group includes a wide array of nonprofit organizations, both that do growth management, livable communities, bike and pedestrian, local transit agencies, as well as transportation advocates and others. And then two really critical pieces. One, there's a lot of movement within these kinds of sales tax measures, as well as other kinds, to do regional advanced mitigation. And what that does is allow Contra Costa to spend upfront on creating quality of life through protecting the areas of the county that are really critical and important, and that people can enjoy them. And then ultimately, one of the biggest sticking points is we really need to get rid of the 30-acre exception for the urban limit line. It's not been useful, and it encourages speculation and really undermines the growth management provisions in and of themselves. So we'd like to see that done away with, and that if there needs to be a review, it be done by the voters, and that's the intention of voter-approved urban limit lines. So those are our comments for this evening. Look forward to working with you all in the future, and appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Bruce Olson, and that is the last card I have.
Good evening. I am Bruce Olson. I'm here with Bike East Bay, supporting my friend and colleague Dave Campbell. What he said is what I'm saying too, but I'd also like to point out that over Measure C and Measure J, we have spent money on bicycle facilities. We've plucked a lot of the low-hanging fruit. We would like to see, going forward, more money for bicyclists, because the next projects that we may build are going to be more expensive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruce. Okay, if there are no other speakers, I'd just like to make a couple of comments and then ask my colleagues for direction. You know, I'm pleased to see so many of our stakeholders here tonight. The room is pretty full. And I just want to say up front, we are looking forward to working with all of you as we go forward over the next several months. As you know, on the consent calendar, the CTP adoption was postponed to allow staff to respond to the many, many, many comments that have been submitted. In fact, our outreach for the CTP brought in more comments on what we do here at CCTA than we have received in the entire 28 plus years we've been in existence. So on all the items put together. So we apparently did a fairly good job of reaching out into the community, and it's going to take us a little time to respond to all those comments. So that is the reason for the delay. I also wanted to mention that this is an ongoing process. In fact, you will remember, my colleagues will remember, that at our June 18th, 2014 meeting, we actually indicated that we wanted to embark upon this process. And as Ross has indicated here tonight, we need to start that work to develop the next phase, which is the Transportation Expenditure Plan for the 2016 measure. And so what staff is asking for tonight is for us to give them direction to come back to us at our next meeting with an outreach process, principles, policies, timelines, all of that stuff that we need to get rolling and to keep us organized as we go forward with the development of the TEP. So since we don't really have a roadmap, that's what we need, and the request tonight is to ask for that. So any questions, discussion, comments, a motion? Dave?
Yeah, I saw a bunch of lights going, so I'll hold off on the motion. In the timeline, or what I just heard you say, does that also include sending it out to the RTPCs?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, right now.
RTPCs, the stakeholders, the whole world will be involved in this process as they were under Measure J, and probably even more because we know better now how to use social media and reach even more people. Karen?
Thank you. And I'm going to support the motion because I think we do need to get the roadmap that our chair is talking about. But I continue to be cautious about this, not discounting any of the hard work and wonderful work our staff has done and hearing from the advocates. But since Measure C was passed and subsequently Measure J, there's been a seismic change in funding to local governments. And we've seen that a lot of our local governments have instituted sales tax measures to meet their own budgetary requirements. And unfortunately, I think that is going to continue into the future, and it will be up to the voters to decide their priorities. I strongly support that. But as one of two members of the Board of Supervisors, the board is on comment, I won't say notice, comment that we are cautious about this, and we are not there yet. And I just feel that it's very important that as we move along, and this is a great timeline, but that it wouldn't be fair to anyone for all this work to go forward and then at the end, depending on whether it's the Board of Supervisors or any of you representing other RTPCs, to say, oh, wait a minute, you know, blah, 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 we've got some problems here. So I'm going to continue to keep that cautionary voice there that we need to have so that we have bugs around here, flying bugs for those taped, not CIA bugs. I just want to continue to have that also at the forefront as we continue this discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Don?
Thank you. Do you know we don't have CIA bugs?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Well, I'll support this. I think it's a good plan. I think we need to move ahead, and I'm looking forward to it being successful. Just a minor comment. I think the way that the timeline is presented is a little bit presumptuous. It sort of assumes that we're going to go ahead. And it may be that the polling doesn't, we don't come up with a set of projects and programs for which there's good polling. So all I would suggest is that in things like adopt the final TEP, that there's, we make the decision whether to adopt it, whether the Board of Supervisors decides whether to place it on the ballot, things like that. That hopefully it will all go through and the voters will support it even with more support than the Alameda County measure got.
And thank you, Mr. Tatson. That's an excellent point. I think that was one of the reasons I want to be so cautious is I don't want the public to think we're getting that far ahead. They will be a critical component, and I think we need to use that kind of verbiage as opposed to, we know these are action plans and that's how our agendas are written, but consider adopting, consider releasing, at least as far as the TEP, some of the other things. Thank you.
Okay, coming on around. Newell.
I think this is perfect timing, and the reason, for several reasons. One, that we're at a critical juncture in how our economy is going to go forward. We're finally getting to the place where I'd say we're understanding what the 21st century is going to be like. We've struggled as a nation, we struggled financially as cities and things like that to come to a spot, and I think we've learned a lot of good lessons over the past 15 years. And transportation is part of that. When you look at the realities that funding in our lifetime is not going to ever be adequate to just build our way or pave our way out of our problems. So the creativeness, the innovation hub that we're really creating here on the autonomous vehicle, being part of all of that, I think we have demonstrated, and we had criticism from one of the organizations here tonight, which I take great exception to. We have done an extraordinary job of providing projects that are on time and on budget when almost no other agency can do that. Do some projects take longer? Welcome to the world of governance. Some do take, but we have not lost our mission, and we have accomplished the things we're going to do. And while everybody wants to accomplish everything as quickly as we can and believe that their project's more important, each of us through the RTCP process prioritizes that. And sometimes we change in how we prioritize that based on what we think our local communities need. So the timing is perfect. And I think from my seat representing the 19 cities, we need to have a blank plate. Blank page, empty plate. To the point that we really consider everything and not presuppose that it's going to look exactly like what the past is. Will it have some of the same thing? Certainly. We have some ongoing things, and those that we have demonstrated to our voters, to our residents, our taxpayers, that are really successful and beneficial, then those deserve merit to be considered to be extended. But the reality is if we don't take care of ourselves, nobody else will. And what we have seen over the past few years, really since Measure J came back on, we have leveraged our dollars. And while at the federal level we're only going to see some patches for a while, in the next couple of years it's going to actually, if you invest in the United States and invest in technology, I think we're going to be positioned at the right time to have our own funding sources to partner up with those. No different than when we got ERA funds. So timing is everything. And, this is just a plan, whether it happens now or it doesn't happen. As it was said, clearly, the only way it's going to happen is that we put together a plan that the voters will accept. It's incumbent upon us to be smart with our money, to demonstrate our past successes, and prove that we will accomplish those tasks. And I'm absolutely confident with the team that we have, the leadership we have here. I think the board of directors here, is energized and excited about what we're doing. And, I still would put us against any other agency. And given our scale, what we accomplish is extraordinary. So, I'd second the motion when Dave makes it.
Okay. Dave?
Proceed with the roadmap.
Okay. So we have a motion from Hudson, a second from Newell. Okay, 2 more lights. Yeah, go ahead, Janet.
Just quickly, I want to say that I think it's really important that we do get going as soon as possible, because even though it may seem like there's a lot of time between now and November 2016, if you consider all the things that we have to do, there isn't a lot of time. So I'm really happy and supportive that we are doing so tonight. That's all I want to say.
Thanks. David?
Thanks. Let me echo the comments by the last two speakers and also say I've seen probably 5,000 or 6,000 Gantt charts and plans of this nature. There's nothing at all, in my judgment, that's presumptive about it. These are target dates. This is our staff saying these are the dates by which these things need to happen in order for a plan to come to fruition. So I don't want to mislead the public or anybody else by suggesting it's anything other than that, and I'm not suggesting either of you were. But I think it needs to be said clearly. This doesn't represent a stake in the ground where our staff has made any presumptions about anything at all passing. It's if we want to have a vote on a TEP measure in November of 2006, which is not yet established, but if we do, this is a reasonable timeline and a time frame for getting there. And these are just targets so that we can get there without killing our staff and killing ourselves. So I'll stop talking there, but just to say I agree completely with the last two speakers.
All right. Any further comments? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And thank you all for being here. That's really wonderful because we look forward to a robust discussion, and I'm sure that's what we will have. See some old friends in the audience, so that's nice to see. We'll look forward to working with you. All right, the next item on our agenda is 4B6. That is the approval of 10 cooperative agreements and 4 consultant contracts for the Priority Development Area Planning Grants. And Brad, you're going to handle this one?
I am. Thank you, Chair. In September, the authority approved in concept 10 grants to 10 project sponsors to do PDA planning and the approval of 5 consultant teams that would do that planning. And since that time, we have, with our contract managers, worked with the sponsors to first select the consultant teams that they want to work with, and then to develop scopes of work that those consultant teams would work on. So far, we've, out of the 10 sponsors, 8 of them have already adopted and approved their co-op agreements. There are 2 that remain. The county will approve theirs next week. There is some discussion still going on with Walnut Creek on the exact shape of their scope, but they are working forward to get that scope set. So tonight we're asking that you approve the co-ops, and they will come back for signature by the chair, and also to approve contracts with the 4 consultant teams that were selected to do the work.
And I want to thank staff for all the hard work on this. I think this has just been a brilliant solution to the challenge of how we help these communities get these plans working. So any comments, questions? Don?
As one of the recipients of the grants, we've been very pleased with our opportunity to work with the authority and the person who's been assigned to us, and with the opportunity to interview a couple of the consultant teams. And our council did adopt the co-op agreement at our last meeting, and I would move approval.
Okay, I have a motion from Tatson and a second from Abelson. Any further discussion? Yes.
I just want to comment. I'm pleased to hear Dawn, and I know other cities have commented they thought it's going real well. I'd just like to ask, given it's kind of new, and because it's kind of a service we're selecting, to maybe ask the cities and all those who are receiving these grants to kind of come back with a review and sort of a summary. How did it work? What would you change, if anything? It's new, was it the right consultant mix? And if not, it will help staff, help us too. But I'd second.
Good idea. Good idea. Okay, the motion was by Tatson, the second was by Abelson. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain. That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. We are on to correspondence and communications. You have the reports in your packet. Associated committee reports are also in your packet. On to commissioner and staff comments. I will comment that I had the pleasure of attending the CalCog directors meeting in Sacramento with Randy yesterday. That meant he had to actually go. He was happy to go. It's a really talented group of folks of councils of government directors and other regional planning authorities like ours from across the state. And there were probably, 40 people in the room or so. And, a lot of really bright minds talking about the challenges of transportation and things like that. And we had a lot of discussion about legislation coming forward. Our own Jim Frazier came and made a presentation. As you all know, he is the chair of Assembly Trans. We had a member of the staff from Jim Bell's office. He is the chair of the Senate Transportation Committee. Of course, he represents the peninsula, Southern Peninsula area. So 2 Bay Area folks who are in positions of influence in transportation at the state level. And Jim has some legislation going forward, and he's really determined we're going to get there. So we'll be having discussions on that as we go forward with our legislative discussions. All right. Any commissioner comments? Yes, Gail?
I passed out to you a card announcing the late-night bus service that we have. You can see that it is now going to stop at Walnut Creek, Pleasant Hill, and Pittsburgh Bay Point. We're doing it in conjunction with AC Transit, who is actually providing the service, and the authority, as well as ACTC and MTC, are helping to fund it. As you know, BART cannot run all night because otherwise we wouldn't have reliable service. So we've heard the public, and so we've come up with this option so that they can get home after BART stops.
Wonderful.
The other thing I want to pass out, just if you're interested in this, as you know, APTA and MTC were back in D.C. talking to Congress, and I just wanted to pass out a report to Congress in case you want to see what we're saying.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gail. Don, and then Karen. Your light's on.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, Karen?
Thank you. I had the opportunity to share with some of my colleagues before our meeting started, but I did want to give a brief update on Supervisor Federal Glover. Thank you for passing around the card to sign. I know he will appreciate that. I had the literal pleasure today of seeing him in the hospital. He's doing very well. He's very high in his spirits and looking forward to being back with us in person. But he appreciates all the goodwill and best wishes that have been sent to him. And he is allowed visitors. And so he is going to be remaining in the hospital until his surgery. And if you do have the opportunity, he's over at UCSF on Parnassus. And I know he would welcome seeing you. I just can't say enough about how wonderful he looked, and I know both Supervisor and Anderson, and I miss him a lot.
Thank you, Karen. Yes, we all miss him a lot. So we are wishing him well and hoping that he gets the transplants that he needs. Executive staff comments.
Thank you, Chair Pierce. After our CalCog, which I go to every meeting because we have the president of CalCog, and I was told to go, so I go to Sacramento. I don't make the Sacramento many times, but I do go for the CalCog meeting. But afterwards, we were asked to make a presentation to a company called eRepublic, and eRepublic owns Governing, TechWire, Future Structure, Government Technology. Right here. Governing, yes. And so they want to know what were the innovative projects that we were working on, so we gave them about probably close to an hour presentation on all the things that we're working on. I was asked to be on the first page of my executive director's report, I was asked to be part of a meeting of the Minds 2015 meeting. It's going to be held in Richmond. And they asked me, do you think you can get the mayor to this? And I said, I probably have some pull there, so hopefully, Mayor, you show up on October 20th. But the next meeting where we have a discussion of the topics that you may be interested in from the city of Richmond perspective, I'm going to invite you there because I'm the only public sector person. There's a lot of startups and a lot of Microsoft people and other companies like that, and so I need help from another public sector person to defend the fact that I think that we're pretty innovative as well. And then, as I mentioned, I don't go to Sacramento very, very much. Ross was there today, and he got to meet a lot of the assembly members. I was asked by the committee chair, Jim Frazier, for the Assembly Trans Committee to make a presentation on funding. And So I did that, and now I'm asked to go back to Sacramento to meet one of the members of his committee on a meet and greet basis, and he's from Southern California, so I've agreed to do that. So I'm going to go have, I guess, coffee with Assemblymember Eric Linder from Riverside, and so we'll meet, and whatever he needs to know, and I think I spelled his name incorrectly here. It's Linder. That's, as I mentioned maybe briefly last time, the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee consultant Andrew Dorman called, and he asked for an appointment with us, and so Lindsay, Ross, and I developed a WebEx. Lindsay's great at that, so she had the phone number all set up, and we actually gave him the same presentation that we gave the Assembly Trans Committee, and that one of the things we're looking for is a stable federal funding source so that we don't get whipsawed and you don't have programming problems and you don't get a project ready for construction and then you run out of money and you can't start that project. We also said we want to continue the tax exempt status for municipal bonds. That's very, very important to our program because we accelerate our program. I know it was mentioned that for whatever reason some of our projects are delayed. You know, the Caldecott Tunnel was opened on time or early to the public. State Route 4 is on schedule. Interstate 680 auxiliary lanes were built on schedule, and the connector ramps are probably 20 days behind schedule, but I'm sure Ivan will bring that schedule back into play. We also talked about a letter of no prejudice process where we actually loan the federal government money and start a project now, and if we get an approval that it is eligible, we get paid back for that prior work. Currently, we don't get that option. And so I sent him some information on the transit letter of no prejudice process, so Andrew has that as well. And then we said what you ought to do, the last thing is, in order to leverage or incentivize taxing yourselves for transportation, create a state and local partnership at the federal level so that states that have extra money or local agencies that have extra money can leverage the federal dollar if that's what you choose to do. And to reiterate on the last topic that Brad brought up, the other option was 11 cities going through the federal process each individually, and that would have taken you a lot of time and a lot of effort. And so my hat's off to Brad and the team for doing that. I did a presentation or interview on, there's a lot of talk about autonomous vehicles. We're getting asked to do a lot of interviews, and we did one for American Society of Civil Engineers magazine. I did one for, who is the company today? Bloomberg, yeah, little Bloomberg News. Yeah, Bloomberg News. And along the lines of autonomous vehicles, we did meet Chair Pierce, Commissioner Durant, and I met, and Lindsay met with the mayor, the vice mayor, the city manager, and the reuse director on the nuances of Gomentum Station. And so we spent some time there talking about the advantage of bringing that technology and the smart jobs that are coming with it to Concord, California. So we're excited about that. So, and then I did meet with Mr. Peoples, Commissioner Peoples, and talked a little bit about what's going on at the authority. Thank you for meeting with me. And I also, his alternate, Mayor Simmons from Walnut Creek, I met with him as well. That's my report. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Your calendar is in your packet. And in the interest of time, we will thank you all for coming, and we will adjourn to a closed session for a public employee performance evaluation pursuant to Government Code 54957 for the Executive Director, and a conference with labor negotiators per Government Code 54957.6 with the agency designated representative as the chair and the unrepresented employee as the Executive Director. Thank you all for coming.